Hi, this is praios, and yeah, I used to be a professional gambler, not that active anymore, but still producing videos from time to time. And yeah, the YouTube algorithm brought this into my recommended video list. So the title is playing GTO costing you money? And yeah, I want to watch what these guys are telling us. And my take is yes, it's costing you money. Poker, I mean, I don't know if you know the mechanics, how GTO works, but basically it is a computer playing like millions or probably even billions, depends on how long you run the simulation, hands against himself, determining the best strategy. And he's also playing both players, so he is playing basically everyone after he's had that many tries. He's able to figure out how to play optimally. So GTO is the best strategy given that your opponent plays optimal. In reality, most people don't play optimal. What does this mean? It means that playing GTO is not costing you that much if you play against someone who is also a GTO wizard who trains a lot with this sort of programs. But it will cost you a lot if you play against someone who is like terrible at poker. Against this guy, going with the GTO route is like costing you massively in EV. And I think that's one of the biggest problems of all these poker sites and poker coaches today. No one, at least in my impression, is talking about exploiting the weak guys. And yeah, everyone is just like GTO, GTO, GTO. You have to go into the sims and learn how to squeeze out the last 0.1 BB per 100 by knowing exactly what to do if you get check raised on the river. But that's actually bullshit. You need to make good reads on your opponent. You also, you don't make massive amounts of money if you play against other good players. I mean, that's quite obvious, especially as the rake tends to increase more and more. And yeah, if you play like whatever it is, let's say 10 BB per 100 rake, then your opponents must be that bad that you can beat them and also the 10 BB rake. So one part of your job is to get in games with weak players, and weak players are not playing optimal. I mean, they are very far away from playing optimal. And against these guys, playing GTO will not help. You have to use an exploitative strategy. I mean, that's what I advocate all the time, but no, everyone else either has forgot about it or is just stupid and does not understand the concept of GTO. But let's say what these guys are advocating. Let's get into the video. By the way, this is a video from the mechanics of poker. Yeah, feel free to check them out as well. This is on YouTube. Let's go.
I think like you have people who are bad that don't use PIO. Then in the middle, you know, when you use PIO, it's really good. And then at some point you go surpass PIO. You mentioned a couple things. I want to start off with, you said you at some point you realized why other players were better than you and why other players were worse than you. I quote. So do you still recall like some of the reasons why some players were better than you and other players are worse than you, and what did you learn from that, and how did that impact your game?
Yeah, it comes back to what you were saying about when you said like, yeah, you're a practitioner first and then you started to study. And I think like it was just this transition in my mind from like thinking that like, oh yeah, like being good at poker means being able to mirror pile outputs, and then being like, hang on, like the people who win, they don't do this, you know? And like nowadays you could ask me who I respect more, like the poker professor or the poker practitioner. It's like obviously the practitioner, like the guy who shows up every single day and like has amazing results without playing so much like a solver. I guess Stefan was
not sure if I can agree with this. It has to be a good mix of practice and theory. And you should also not only rely on GTO. I mean, it is way harder to make good assumptions and good analysis against people who are not playing GTO, because you have to put in your own assumptions. And if your assumptions suck, the results you get from your analysis will suck as well. So it's not just pull up the solver, put in some numbers and then see what happens. No, you have to use your brain and make good assumptions and good estimations about how your opponent is playing. And not everybody can do that. So that's way harder, but will make you way more money in the long run if you are able to get into good games.
Like the best example of this of all, who like, yeah, and even I would even say Marcus is this guy as well. So yeah, it was like starting to realize that like, yeah, like EV comes from like, let's say the most basic example, like overbluffing in spots where people underfold, overfolding in spots where people underbluff. And then starting to see the people that did this, the people that didn't do this, like the people who like, yeah, like even nowadays, if I see someone has a stat where they overfold in a spot where I know that like the average player overbluffs by a lot, I'm like, well, that's an objective leak because he's like folding bluff catchers in spots where they should be winning on average. Therefore, that's like something that I can probably exploit and even passively starts to pass some EV to me. And then I also started to realize as well, it's like an ego thing. Like there was
yeah, that's also something I talked about a lot in the past. I mean, I translate that to something more usable. Get Holdem Manager or some other tracking software, at least on sites where it's allowed, if you're playing online, and analyze your opponents off the table. Look into their stats, find the leaks, and exploit them. And you play against the same guys day in and day out. And if you know their weaknesses, go for it. I mean, this would help you a lot. You can destroy them by finding the weaknesses in their game. And by the way, description are also all the tools you need to become a better poker player, like GTO solutions and also coaching sites and stuff, which I think are good to get better. Anyways, let's continue.
Guy Tom Battle, a full ring grinder, who I remember I used as an example for the Split B videos, where like he was like notoriously not strategically a great player. Like he had a lot of like what would appear to be like baseline problems with his game. But every year he was making so much money. And I said to the guys in BitB, I was like, look, like we can sit here and we can be like, look, he doesn't do these things which we've seen in Pyro. So like therefore we have like.
Yeah, there's also another thing. You don't have to be great at poker. You just have to be able to get into the best, juiciest games with the weakest players. I mean, even if you suck, you like blind on one eye. If you play against completely blind guys all the time, you still will make money. So yeah, getting into the best games is also a skill. And I think guys like Tom Dwan, for example, might make way more money than all these GTO wizards. These guys on NL1K that probably on paper play better than Dwan, would crush him in a heads-up match. They make way less money because they don't get in these high-stakes games.
Superiority over him, or we can be like, look, he turns up, he makes money, like he makes a lot more money than most of us every single day, and we can be like, well, he's a better poker player because that's what poker's about. And why is it that he makes more money? Because some of his leaks aren't real leaks, like they're like leaks which don't cost him EV in practice, and because he's very good at the things which actually generate EV, which is game selecting, playing the right times, etc. And like you can't like
game selection, very important. That's what I said.
Devalue these skills because that is part of what being a professional poker player is. So I started to realize, put my ego to the side more and realize more that like these soft skills are skills to be proud of and matter as well. And just want to say, in case Tom Battle, I mean, there's absolutely no shots at him because I respect a lot like that.
Yeah, I think you, as I said again and again, you should focus on both. And it could also be the case that I play completely different against opponent A and opponent B. If both are way off GTO, I will not go the GTO line, but do the thing that makes me the most money. And yeah, that could also look like it's an exploitable league to others. I mean, if I played a lot against a guy who's never bluffing, and if he just raises the river and I fold always against him, if I don't have the nuts or close to it, it makes sense because he's never bluffing, he's always having strong hands. But to other players, if the most hands they recorded would be with this guy on the table and this guy caught a lot of good hands, they could be under the impression that I have the league, that I'm folding too much to river raises. But in fact, I'm just folding a lot to river raises from a specific type of guy, like the loose passive fish, which I want to get into games with. They usually have a hand when they check raise the river, for example, or raise the river. So against these guys, I fold. But against regulars, the decision would be completely different. And yeah, more like GTO based or read based. And yeah, if I think this guy is able to bluff, and this obviously would be probably way more likely than with the loose passive fish.
He's played all these years and had the success he has, which is like hard to do when you keep showing up. So yeah,
this sounds very familiar. I think, and the response that we have, or at least that I heard you saying that I had as well, I would then get angry. You know, when a guy like that would show up my table and win, I would get angry. And then basically that anger kind of should have showed me that something is wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I can actually learn something from them. And indeed, like, what makes a good poker player is so much more than you having a couple of good plays in your arsenal, right? It's like you can be great, but if you keep on game selecting wrong and keep on playing in the toughest games, yeah, you're going to be the biggest loser. So I think it's very important as well to estimate your skill. So what did Tom Battle teach you in the end?
Yeah, it just taught me this idea that, like, yeah, it taught me that showing up and like game selecting maybe matters more than everything else at mid stakes and like lower end of high stakes. And just this idea that, like, if you're not doing this properly, then all of this time
game selection is so important, especially the lower the stacks, the more important it might even be. Because the rake is insane the lower you go in the stakes. And yeah, you need terrible players to overcome the rake.
Spending in pyros, like getting extra X% of EV at a spot is kind of pointless if your aim is to make money. Obviously, if your aim is to play like pyro, then the ladder is important. And then secondly, I was like, well, if his strategic leaks are this big, like,
yeah, a lot of guys are like very stupid. Like, for them, it's an ego thing. They think they are the best and they just play against everyone, not recognizing that others might be better because they are just overconfident. That's one thing. And the other thing is, I mean, what's the point in playing against other very good players where no one has a huge edge? You should put your energy on making the most money possible, and that's usually not battling against other good racks, because the mediocre racks will not battle, only the good racks battle. Yeah, the good thing is have more sides to play on and get into the games with the weakest competition possible.
This obvious and he's still winning. Doesn't that tell me that, like, some of them aren't actually like costing him EV in practice? And then it started to push me more down that avenue. And then obviously started to, like, Marcus was playing Stefan a lot of this time, and I was like, oh yeah, like, what's Stefan doing? It's like obviously not what Pio's doing. Why is it that he's winning more than every single other player ever at this time, at least? And then the same kind of ideas. It's like, yeah, the poker professor, like, doesn't play like Stefan. Poker professor wins a lot less money than Stefan. Why is it? So what are the things that Stefan's doing to transfer EV from his opponents to him? And yeah, then started to look at my own game and be like, well, are these things which I'm doing actually good in practice or not, and why? So it was more like,
it also sounds a bit like he was this type of guy, just like looking at GTO, applying the strategy against anyone, no matter, yeah, if it makes sense or not.
Using the solver less as a kind of output to copy, and more as a kind of tool to look more at real life strategies. And then just to continue with that, also once I realized the problems I was having, like in my PIO copying days, I don't think I was ever really a true PIO copier, as I would call them nowadays, like someone who tries to like truly mirror the solver. But I did start to realize that like there are a lot of things that when you try and mirror the solver, you always do wrong. Like you always make the same mistakes. And I was like, well, I know that some of my opponents like have like publicly gone on.
I would love to hear some examples, but seems like he's not coming up with any. But yeah, obviously it use solvers like sort of baseline what you would do against unknowns or other player where you think they are very good. But against weaker opponents, yeah, definitely adjust your strategy, because as already said in the beginning, GTO means that you play against another player who's also playing optimally, and usually in reality everyone is way off optimal play, and this is especially true for fish. I mean, just take someone who has like 70 VPIP, so enter support with 70% of hands, and using the GTO strategies for this guy would be like insane, as he's entering the port with a way wider range. It would not even, yeah, I mean, what are you doing against someone like this? If you use GTO strategies, you do so wrong, because yeah, the solver would assume that this guy's just entering the pot, depending on the position, let's say with like 24% of hands and not like 70%.
Videos saying this is their strategy to mirror the solver. And then I would be like, well, these guys, they're obviously going to be doing the same things as me, because they're human beings too. And like, it's just too hard to unless you have some like rules which aren't copy solver, you always end up making the same errors. So yeah, I started to really think more about how like different humans play. There's like and like how that can result in more EV to me in the long run. And again, with Marcus around, so was unbelievably helpful for this, because he's kind of thought as like I think a lot of people perceive him as like a PIO player, and he is very, very good, but it wasn't really what he's doing. So I'll go into don't want to go into too much detail there, but yeah, it was very, very helpful for me.
I remember actually recently, I think it was Kluka who said, yeah, you know, actually the better you get, the more you stop playing like PIO. I think like you have people who are bad that don't use PIO. Then in the middle, you know, when you use PIO, it's really good. And then at some point you go surpass PIO, right?
Yeah, that's also a lesson you have to learn. I mean, so many poker players are just like, okay, I put the situation into PIO and then I know what to do. I mean, PIO is a solver for No Limit Holdem, but yeah, there are others as well. And for PLO, what I used to play the last years of my career, this would be what are even these things called? PLO Range Explorer, something like that. It's from Jay Nendes, a solver, and there's another one. What is it even called? Yeah. Anyways, it is in the links below. Another product is made from Phil Galfond and his coaching site. And yeah, these are the two competing products. Both are good.
You're like, yeah, okay, PIO has taught me a couple of basic principles about, you know, theory and GTO that I had to understand. But now that I understand them, I go beyond PIO and exploit the shit out of my opponents.
Yeah. And like, don't get me wrong, I use PIO every single day. Like, I mean, like thousands and thousands of hours, and probably thousands of hours still to come, where I'm like running my own hands through PIO. But it's just like changing the reference point from being like, all right, I want to play the same as the output on the screen, to being like, what does the output on the screen tell me? And what does that tell me about if my play was good or bad, and how I might want to change it? And like, what does the strategy look like on the screen? Is that realistically something I can do? And is it something I even want to do? Like, and if not, what can I do? Which is kind of good and possible. So yeah, I think I disagree with you for sure. It's like one of the biggest flaws that I see is people trying to like holding like copying solver outputs on a pedestal and thinking that's what makes
Yeah, also people are like trying to remember every copy, every combo and what to do with it and shit. This is like completely unnecessary. You just have to get like the baseline or some general patterns, what you are supposed to do with some hands, and make adjustments on the fly. And also it becomes way more difficult if you transition from no limit hold'em to pot limit Omaha, because there are way more combinations. It would be even more hard to remember what to do with all of these. So yeah, you get the patterns right and what might be the idea or rule that could be behind the solver's play, and yeah, don't try to remember it by heart, everything. It makes no sense and will not bring you anywhere, especially as playing GTO makes not that much sense anyways. I mean, it makes sense, but not in every situation, and against many players you have to go to the exploitative road.
You money in poker when I really don't think it's the case.
I took a look at your I think it was your BitB coaching profile, and it said that at your profile it said, I adopted PLO Solver at a very early age and think one of my greatest skills is being able to use it efficiently to develop real strategies that work in game. A lot of people waste a lot of time in the wrong way. You also mentioned a little bit earlier about that you were lost in the rabbit hole of PLO. What do you think is like the biggest mistake that people make, and like which rabbit holes did you go down through in PLO that in hindsight were a big waste of time?
Yeah, let's think about this. It's I think just the one, maybe not the biggest one, but the one that comes to my mind first of all is like you can just look at a node. I mean, I guess a basic one which most people are aware of now is like turn double barrels, that you see bet the flop, you bet the turn. And it's very easy to ignore certain parts of the range. Like, at least this is what I did for a long time. I was like, well, let the open end straight draws, they barrel here pretty often, right? And then I would be like, all right, cool, that's basically what I'm doing. And I would like completely ignore all the fractional hands, which like cumulatively add up to a lot of the range and are very important for like where the EV comes from. And especially when you start to consider what the other player might do to make better or worse. Yeah, so like just look and be like, all right, my hand does kind of what I thought it would do. Sure, move on. So that's one of the mistakes. Another mistake is like striving really hard.
So overall range composition. So just don't look at your hand in isolation, but the whole range. What are the parts that are betting with? What are the categories like open end, straight draw, gut shot, top pair, and better, and something like that?
Hard for accuracy, I think. It's like, yeah, trying to be like too accurate rather than looking at the holistic picture. Aggregate reports, I think, are like, I think most people spend too long doing aggregate reports. I would say it's definitely subjective, but for me, I think like flop strategies can be are in general so close in EV, particularly between sizings. Maybe if you want to range bet every board, then you do need to spend more time in aggregate reports.
I mean, it's like a big joke that it's not, sizings are not discussed at all basically on in PLO anymore, and there are not even different sizings available in most in the solvers used because the tree gets so big if you offer more sizings, because unlike in Holdem you have way more hand combinations, and so just someone sets a sizing for this situation and then everyone is like, okay, I probably have to use this sizing. Nobody's questioning it anymore. This is also like quite laughable.
Figure out which ones you can and can't. But yeah, flop strategies are so close in EV that kind of picking your poison, like picking how you want to play, and then sticking with it, learn to implement it and going from there is probably better than spending hours and hours trying to chase that tiny extra bit of EV. And there was something else I was going to say, but it slipped my mind now. But
yeah, it's basically also a principle that applies in life overall. Often people go too much in general, caring about like this smallest detail of something, where in fact they still have big leaks that they should fix first. So you should always start with the biggest thing and fix that, and then go smaller and smaller and smaller. I mean, if you have like this huge leak, a big leak, a small leak, and a tiny leak, fix the huge leak first, and then go down to the ones below, and don't start with the tiny leak first, because you're bleeding money with the huge leak.
Yeah, these kind of ideas. I think accuracy is the biggest problem people have, like striving for accuracy, striving for perfection at the cost of like implementation. And then this is why I think, yeah, when you're a practitioner and you're playing every day, you start to realize like what is possible to do, rather than what is possible on pen and paper to do.
Yeah, it's like, you know, you can spend all the time and aggregate the ports and find all the optimal flop sizings, but in the end, if you don't really understand what a certain sizing achieves on a certain board and how that's going to influence the hand playing out on a later street, then basically, yeah, you can start with a certain flop sizing that was theoretically correct, but if you then butcher the hand on a later street because you don't know how it then plays out, because you didn't really understood why the strategy was there in the first place, it's maybe better you just stick to something that you understand. I think playing a strategy that you understand is always going to be superior than a GTO strategy, or at least a GTO sizing that you don't really.
Okay, we ignore this message. Some stupid guy trying to promote some stupid shit.
Really understand the mechanics behind.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like a very good example of this, I would say, is Dud, one who you had on your podcast. But I respect, I think he's like, I think he's one of the very best players in the world still. And also very, very, I respect a lot about his game. He's like very aware of his own edge as well, and like doesn't take close spots, and obviously has insane results over a big sample. But he's always played like a very, what some people consider a very simple strategy, and I know for a fact what some people would consider a very bad strategy. Like I've seen Run It Once videos, for example, where people say the way he plays it is bad without saying it about him. But the way he understands his strategy so well and plays it so perfectly, that it's like a lot better than a lot of strategies which on paper make capture more EV. So yeah, just a very good example of this, like someone at the very high stakes. And then there's the flip side.
The thing is, some strategies might make more EV on paper because they don't. Yeah, they assume an optimal playing opponent, which nobody is, and there are different degrees of guys who are closer to GTO and not that close.
This again was like Stefan at his peak. Well, maybe Stefan is still at his peak, but he seems to be AFK somewhere. But where he would like really understand how people who tried to implement complex strategies would make mistakes. I think I never spoke to Stefan, but this is what it always looked like he was doing, and then like absolutely massacre them in the spots where like they're making mistakes with their complex strategies, and they would never understand it. So, but look, Stefan's shown up with another hand again, which is like a 3 big blind mistake in Pyro, and like I'm playing this strategy, so I'm beating him without understanding that like what he's doing.
Also, another very common mistake is, especially if you use the PLO solvers, there are no solves for the river. So all these guys who just put in stuff into the solver to find the solution, they can't train river, and they also don't do the effort themselves or run their own river sims. They're just like, okay, I just don't train river. And also like the turn sims are often quite slim and you don't have enough. So we also don't train turn. We just train what to do pre-flop, which they train way too much. And then they train what to do on the flop to a lesser degree, and then turn and river is not getting trained at all. And the next thing also is it doesn't make sense to use the same pre-flop strategy against every guy. I mean, if someone is 3-betting very crazy amount, then you obviously need to 4-bet more. and adjust. Don't open that many hands if he's just behind you, because you will get free bet too much. And they miss to make these adjustments because they are with their GTO mindset always doing the same thing, not adjusting to people who not play optimally and have completely different ranges.
Doing is he's like anticipating the mistakes you're going to make, and you are making them, but you just aren't aware of it. So yeah, just two different approaches, but both kind of thinking along the same lines, I think, really.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, we're done for today. I hope you learned something. Like, subscribe, share, follow me on Twitch if you want to see me live and ask live questions. And yeah, if you watch this on YouTube, consider go to the Twitch or the other way around. Yeah, it was a lot of mumbling. You also feel free to check out my second channel. It's also in the description below. Yeah, thanks for watching. Until next time, bye bye.